I want to tell you a story about something that happened to me when I was around 7 or 8. I was at a family party and my cousin and I got into a fight over the last slice of cake. I stormed off, thinking he was being such a jerk. Around an hour later, he comes outside with a plate with half the slice on it and says something along the lines of, "Let's not be weird about this." Just like that, we were cool again. That's how I saw relationships back then. You fight, make up, and move on. Simple. However, this year, I realized it's a lot more complicated than that. Relationships shape how you see yourself, how you treat people, and sometimes even how you move through the world. Some lift you up, and some break you down, and some teach you things you didn't know you needed to learn.
Initially, I thought relationships were simple. If people cared about each other, things would just magically work out. A common theme in movies and shows were usually along the lines of, if you liked someone, were loyal, and meant well, everything would be just fine. I believe that good intentions were enough, that love or friendship or family would just naturally hold together, no matter what. However, this year, I've started to realize how much more complicated relationships really are. I had never really thought about how feelings aren't the whole story and how there's a lot more depth in relationships.
I never before considered that in relationships there are misunderstandings, like the rumor in Maycomb that he, Boo, went out when the moon was down and peeped in windows. When people's azaleas froze in a cold snap, it was because he had breathed on them. Any small crimes committed in Maycomb were his work, showing how Scout and Jem believed all the neighborhood rumors about Boo being some kind of monster, when he was really actually a gentle person who protected them. There are outside pressures like the feud between the Montagues and Capulets, the opening line to Romeo and Juliet, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, and civil blood makes civil hands unclean, showing how the family's old hatred creates new violence and forces Romeo and Juliet to hide their relationship, which ultimately leads to their death. Finally, there are personal insecurities, like how Jin Wang couldn't stand to be himself. When Jin Wang was at the herbalist mentions, "It's easy to become anything you wish, so long as you're willing to forfeit your soul," showing how changing yourself because of personal insecurities can add a layer of complexity to relationships because you are never truly who you are. It surprised me that our biggest supporters could also be our biggest adversary. In To Kill a Mockingbird, everyone in Maycomb used to respect Atticus. However, when he decides to defend Tom Robinson, they all turn on him and insult him because he aims to defend him. In Romeo and Juliet, Juliet fully trusts her nurse and goes to her for every little thing. That is until the nurse tells her to just marry Paris and forget about Romeo. I always thought adults were supposed to be reliable and support you in your time of need, but this showed me how messy relationships can get even when people think they're helping.
I began to notice how much pressure people put themselves through just to fit into a stereotypical relationship mold. I had a friend who stopped talking to almost everyone after getting into a relationship because he thought that without enough commitment he'd lose it. There was also this girl who completely changed her music taste just to match her boyfriend's. She went from a die-hard Taylor Swift and pop music fan into pretending she liked rock and rap because that's what he liked. I also saw a kid at school completely change his personality when he joined the basketball team. He went from being a kind and funny guy who made everyone laugh and started acting all tough and serious all the time because he thought that's what athletes were supposed to be like. Instead of being himself, he forced himself to be a fake version just to fit in with the crowd.
Eventually, I realized that healthy relationships aren't just about love or loyalty, but rather about truth, vulnerability, and letting people grow. You can't force closeness, and you can't fix everything with affection. Sometimes the best relationships are the ones where people give each other space to be flawed and choose to stay and grow together. This really stood out to me in To Kill a Mockingbird, especially in Scout and Boo Radley's relationship. Boo never directly confronts Scout to prove he's actually a good person. Instead, he gives her room to grow and find her own truth. At the very end of the story, while Atticus is reading Scout a book after everything they've been through, Scout says, "Atticus, he was real nice." And Atticus responds, "Most people are, Scout," when you finally see them. I began to notice that relationships form over time, and there's no way to force someone into a relationship. Sometimes giving each other room to grow is all it takes.
So I hope that the next time you're in a moment where you feel like you're losing someone, ask yourself, am I trying to control them or understand them? Relationships are hard. They take patience, reflection, and unfortunately sometimes letting go. But when we commit to showing up with empathy instead of expectations, we make space for real connection, and that is the greatest gift of all.